Welcome to Sorry if I spit when I speak. We are covering the fourth through seventh rounds as well as the undrafted free agency period for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm joined by the lovely John Sheeran. And John, what we saw, in my opinion, from the Cincinnati Bengals is a very modern draft overall. And we're going to get to the overall grades and kind of the more philosophical approach of the Bengals later on when we have our resident philosopher, Hoji the Electric Smoji. But what we saw was the Bengals emphasizing things like offensive line and taking the running back super, super late, right? So we know that running back was kind of a need. Gio, some injuries here and there. Um, and we were looking to have someone to at least be able to do what he does in case he goes down or in case they want to move on from him for financial concerns, which is always a concern when you're running a team like the Bengals. But they went with the running backs late. They continue to stock up on offensive linemen, and they, of course, got they got the quarterback. They got the quarterback who they liked, and we're gonna get to this. But the Bengals brought in two quarterbacks, and they ended up with both those quarterbacks on their roster. So let us go and start with that, with Ryan Finley, who's a quarterback from North Carolina State. And what's interesting is another guy who went there, Philip Rivers, set all these passing records, right? And Finley is second to him in all those major records. So he had about as good of a career in college as anybody. And he is a smart guy. He got his master's in the 6 years I think he was in college.
Mm-hmm.
So he's very smart. He's known for that. Not the biggest arm, not the cannon arm, but he's a smart guy. He makes smart decisions with the ball. He has been compared to Goff in that he might be a good fit for Zach Taylor, but Goff has a little bit more of a lively arm, I would say. Would you agree, John?
Yeah. The reasons why Finley was here in the fourth is mainly due to the fact that he is almost 30 years old. It's a joke. He's going to turn 25 around Christmas, and part of that was because he originally went to Boise State and lost the job to Brett Ripon, who was supposed to get drafted but ended up being an undrafted free agent going to the Broncos. So he spent 3 years in Boise State as a backup, basically said, I want to start. So he transferred to NC State and started for 3 years there, and now comes into the NFL as a 24-year-old quarterback. And it's very rare for quarterbacks entering the NFL at that age to develop into anything long-term. So right off the bat, you're thinking this guy's only chance to last long in the NFL is to be as a long-term backup. And that's when you really take quarterbacks like this around the 4th or 5th round with the potential to maybe be a spot starter here and there in case injuries occur at the position. So the value is fine, I think, for Finley. Again, with the type of quarterback that he is, this is around where you draft him because there is still talent to work there. I have heard the Goff comparison, but I think Hoji would appreciate this comparison a little bit more. He's kind of like Nick Foles, where he's a big body guy with over-the-top delivery. Not the most compact delivery that you want. It kind of goes out a little bit more, but the mechanics is there. The throwing motion is fine. There's not a lot to tweak with that. The intermediate accuracy is good. The overall field vision is good. He makes good reads, but he's not very aggressive. He doesn't have a lot of zip on the ball. The velocity isn't exactly where you want. I still think Dalton has a little bit more arm strength than him, and he doesn't have the physical stature that Finley has. So Finley, very conservative guy. He's going to keep the offense on pace. And when you talk about a quarterback like that, it's not someone that can really elevate the team. And again, when you look at the data and how old he is and just his overall path to the NFL, it's not indicative of a long-term starter. So you're talking about a backup here, which is fine. It's just the question of there's not much that separates him from practically any other quarterback that was drafted today, and they gave up 2 draft picks to get him. And I understand the mindset of that, because if they had him as their top quarterback that they only had interest in drafting, then that's fine, and that's the process. But just objectively speaking, there's not much separating Finley from any other quarterback in terms of what is expected of him, and that's just a long-term backup. So I don't personally agree with trading him for him. I understand their mindset with that, and I don't think he's the worst guy to have in this position. So in the end, it's kind of a wash for me, I guess.
Well, John, I will say this. Yeah, I mean, we talk about arm strength, but that is not Andy Dalton's only issue with why he hasn't taken the next step. I mean, one thing about Finley that I heard, I think it was Todd McShay was saying, was that he was great in clutch situations late in the game, picking up critical third downs, that kind of a stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of, I think, also why the Nick Foles comparison is there. Because Nick Foles, for all the things he is kind of, very calm under pressure.
Right.
So I mean, that is the kind of thing that, maybe he offered that maybe Dalton does it. But another thing I want to say is that, Finley was deemed the most NFL-ready quarterback. And I know he's, like you said, he's like
30.
40,
so
yeah. Yeah, but no, it's not that simple, right? I mean, remember that guy that came out when he was like 28 or something? He was drafted by the
Brandon
Panthers.
Weeden.
Yeah, he was like 28 years old. He wasn't very NFL ready. It's not just
really.
age. Yeah.
It's kind of how it went when you were drafted by the Browns for the past 20 years, up until Mayfield.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay. So let us move on to Renell Wren, defensive lineman, Arizona State. And it looks like signs look like the Bengals are not happy with Billings' production. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I think overall the interior defensive line group behind Geno Atkins has always been a pseudo issue in terms of guys not really pulling their weight, not being a proper complement to him inside. And Wren, people see him as a nose tackle, and his size is indicative as 318 pounds, almost 6'5". He's got similar measurables to that of a Devin Still, but he's twice the athlete that Still was in terms of every athletic trait. He's in the 90th percentile. He tested like that for that size, and that's fantastic. And when you watch him on tape, he explodes off the ball. He's the first. He's like Ed Oliver in that sense. And I'm not comparing him to Ed Oliver, but he's a snap jumper, but he also has the explosiveness to get off the ball quickly and penetrate the B gap, which makes him have qualities at that of a 3 technique. So I think you have positional versatility there, a guy that can hold his ground in the A gap, but can also push the pocket from rushing the B gap. But the plan is not there, and there's a reason why he's drafted in the 4th round. He's a wild goose with a rocket booster on his back, but he can't find the ball, and that's kind of an issue when it comes to defensive tackles. No long-term starter has ever produced at such a low level coming into the NFL. So the expectations for Wren have to be minimized in terms of just a guy who can be in a rotation for long term, but as a guy taking over for a starting spot, I don't have a lot of confidence in that. There's still a ton of work that needs to be done with him.
Yeah, he's a project. I think we know.
Right.
I think he's a project. He's a kind of like a high upside guy that they're just going to
but the upside isn't really there. That's kind of what I'm alluding to. The athletic upside is there.
Hold on. You said he's a goose with a rocket propeller, and you're telling me there's no upside? That sounds amazing. That sounds exactly.
Have you ever seen a goose tackle? Have you ever seen a goose sack a quarterback? Because he didn't really do that in college.
Okay, but let's say you had like 2-3 years to train the goose.
Then he would be a major outlier, and they would get a win. But I'm not expecting that to happen. Yeah. Honestly, there might be a little bit of school bias here, but the pick kind of reminds me of Marcus Hardison, and he's not. He's a much better athlete than Hardison. I'll give him credit for that. But Hardison never panned out because he never learned proper
injuries. Also injuries. John,
there's also that. But Hardison was never that good of a player. So
wait, he was on our show.
He was on our show, but he wasn't that good of a player.
I don't understand. John, this is not how we get guests on our show. We're never going to get guests on the show if you continue like this. And if you tell me that Jeff Driscoll doesn't have a roster spot, despite him being on our show, I'm going to be very upset.
I'm just going to keep my mouth shut with that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get to that later about Jeff Driscoll's place on the Bengals. Okay. So let's move on to Michael Jordan. Now, I don't get the whole, like, they showed the documentary, or when he was on ESPN, they showed like how he called to get pizza and said, "My name is Michael Jordan." And I don't understand the confusion about his name. It's not that weird. Look, the other Michael Jordan is Michael B. Jordan, and he's an actor. It's not even like, I don't even understand, like, anyways. But so this Michael Jordan, it's weird. Some people, and not just Ohio State fans, say that, hey, he's going to come in right away and he's going to be good. He's going to start. Others are like, oh, this guy's a career backup. Where do you stand, John?
I think right now he's a backup because he's pretty young, but the athletic upside is what you want to see for a pick like this. Um, the Ohio State fans that I talked to about this pick, they said that he was kind of overrated and how he won the same award that Billy Price did when he probably didn't deserve it. But there's like that reputation when it comes to Ohio State. But I don't think that makes him a bad player. I think he was much better. Like Billy Price, I think he was much better at guard before they moved him inside the center. And he's got the length and measurables that Price didn't have at the position. He's almost 6'6", about 315 pounds, and has 34-inch arms, and that's definitely the prototypical size you're looking for a guy that can play not only guard but maybe tackle in an emergency. But again, the explosion is clearly evident on tape, and he tested like an explosive athlete at the combine. The flexibility, the balance, that's also there in pass protection. He's a tenacious blocker. He drives guys into the ground. I like this pick a lot more than I like picking Billy Price in the first round. I think the value fits much better for Jordan here, and I think the plan long term is to have him on the roster as an inactive backup, and then slowly progress him to become Clint Boying's replacement in 2020 and beyond, and reunite Jordan and Price at left guard and center, just like they were back in the 2017 Ohio State season. So I like the athletic upside here. I think there's a chance for him to become a long-term starter. I know they traded up for him. This is the trade up that I sanctioned a lot more than trading up for Ryan Finley. So this is the first good pick, in my opinion, of this day.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, you are the offensive line guy. I mean, that is what you really know better than anybody I know. Now, okay, so let's move on to the 6th round, and we're talking Travion Williams, a running back out of Texas A&M.
Another good pick.
Yeah. Well, he thought he was going to go a lot higher, obviously. Obviously, everybody does, but he was really upset. He's like, I'm going to make you guys pay. And if I'm not mistaken, he is known as a character guy, like a confident guy who boosts the whole locker room. Is that correct?
I don't really know a lot about that, but what I do know is that he was one of the most productive running backs in his draft class, and there's no reason why he should have fell to the 6th round. Similar size concerns to Gio. I think he was measured in at 5'8", 205 pounds, less than 31-inch arms, which long-term doesn't really project very well. But again, this is the day 3 pick, and at Texas A&M, in the same running behind the same blocking scheme that Jim Turner is going to bring to Cincinnati, there's a clear fit with that. And at Texas A&M, he produced 33% of their total offense at 21 years old last year, which is it's an elite number. It's elite production is what you have to look for in terms of draftable running backs. And this pick is, like I said on Twitter, 10 times better than drafting Mark Walton in the 4th round last year, because running back is still the same degree of need, but this is much better value in finding a similar, if not better, player 2 rounds later. A guy, again, that's familiar with the system, has a similar skill set to that of Giovanni Bernard. Gives him long-term insurance in the event that they don't re-sign Bernard, which I think is pretty likely at this point.
Well, a lot of people will be very upset. He's kind of like the most beloved player. But okay, so Travion, when I look at him, I didn't see a 5'8" guy. Like when I saw his height, I was like, wait, is that right? He stands tall when he runs,
Mm-hmm.
And he yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the vision is one of his best characteristics in terms of reading blocks outside to in. A lot of experience running out of the shotgun. Has a good feel for his blocks and a good feel about which read to take. And the positive of being that short is that you can kind of hide behind the offensive line, and the second level defenders have a hard time reading where you're going to go. But if you always have the extra step and extra vision to kind of make the linebackers miss a little bit, he's gonna have some advantageous runs.
He did. But I didn't. Okay, so he's not a Geo in the sense that I don't see a lot of shiftiness. He's very decisive. No. You said he knows how to read his blocks.
More of a stiff athlete, yeah.
Yeah, but the blocks were there. It seemed like yeah, he reading the blocks, but there was good blocking in front of him, right? So like you have some running backs that if you give them good blocking, they're going to be the best, right? Like let's say like a DeMarco Murray type guy, right? And then you have some guys who they're good at making something out of nothing. He doesn't seem like that type.
I think a good way to describe it is that momentum runners, where they might not like be as explosive once they get the ball, and they kind of have to build up speed a little bit to kind of make guys miss. And the opposite of that is very rare, and it's something that Joe Mixon possesses, and only a handful of other running backs in the NFL possess. So he's not that explosive of an athlete. He's not that twitchy of an athlete. And even in speed, he's really not that fast. He doesn't really have an elite athletic trait, which kind of limits his upside overall. But I think, yeah, just in terms of just a guy that can keep the offense moving, avoid negative runs, and occasionally make guys miss in the open field, and just find a way to get yards. I think that's basically Travion in a nutshell. Not an elite athlete, but he knows how to produce. He knows how to follow blocks, and if he has to create for himself, I think he can do that in a pinch. But again, that minimal athleticism, unfortunately, will kind of hurt him long term, and that's probably why he was here in the 6th round. But again, you look at the production, and you look at all the rest of the profile, and this is definitely worth a 6th round pick for what they need.
Yeah, well, they doubled down in 6th round and got Rodney Anderson from Oklahoma, which is a place where we have some good running backs, like the aforementioned the Marco Murray, Adrian Peterson, right? Now, Rodney, what I see is a guy who's a really good pass catcher. Like, I'm talking like sometimes he looked like a receiver catching over the middle.
Yeah, he's Joe Mixon light, and you forgot to mention Joe Mixon, by the way, in terms of Oklahoma running backs.
Oh, yeah, right. Mix it. To be honest with you, yeah, I searched Oklahoma running backs to remind myself, and his name didn't come up. So there's a little bias there, I think. The Google is again, as always, is messing with the searches. So look, he's a little more shifty than Williams, Rodney Anderson.
Yeah.
But his big issue is lots of injuries. I'm talking, right. Broken leg, fractured vertebrae. And he hurt his knee in 2018 when everybody's hoping he's going to boost his stock.
Mm-hmm. So, and if he didn't injure that knee, he probably would have been drafted in the top 2 rounds because, like I said, Joe Mixon Light's probably pretty similar, and there might be some jersey bias with that, but he moves like him, and he was 6 foot flat, 224 pounds. Unfortunately, didn't get to test the combine, but breakaway speed, shiftiness with the ball in his hands, ability to create on his own. A lot of the similar characteristics that made Joe Mixon a very good prospect is what makes Rodney Anderson a very good prospect. And unfortunately, 2 leg injuries, one of them an ACL, a freak neck injury. Honestly, it sounds a lot like Eifert when you're talking about durability issues like that. But you're implementing him as the 4th running back on the roster. Last year they carried 3. They saw what injuries did to the position. I guess they don't want to go through that again. And this kind of topped off their overall message that we want to run the ball, a lot of outside zone. We want to set up the play action game, very similar to what the Rams did with Jared Goff. I think Anderson is fine in terms of potentially replacing the guy like Mixon in case he gets injured because he has similar running style, similar ability. They don't want to lose what Mixon brings to the table if Mixon isn't on the field. So in a sense, they got the Bernard replacement Williams, they got the Mixon replacement Anderson, but more importantly, one of them was a compensatory pick in the 6th round. One of them was just another 6th round pick. The value is good. They're both talented players. I think they can see some decent returns here.
Yeah. Well, another area where we were thinking, are the Bengals going to go corner early or not? Because fans aren't really happy with Dre's production and are hoping we get, a boundary corner to kind of complement our other 2 very solid to very good corners. And Dre, he has his issues, with the interference and whatnot. And we got Jordan Brown from South Dakota State. Now, this guy is a former wide receiver, and honestly, he has the attributes of a former wide receiver. Great hands, he knows how to stay with the receiver. He knows the routes, but he doesn't have the physicality of a cornerback.
Yeah, and last year they drafted a former wide receiver playing cornerback in Darius Phillips, and I think Phillips was the better cornerback than Devontae Harris. But again, this is dipping into the small school circuit when trying to find that high upside cornerback. But the production was definitely there. South Dakota State tested like the 95th percentile in terms of pass deflection market share, 80th percentile in terms of interception market share. But yeah, the physicality is definitely what's going to hold him back. They didn't really tackle at South Dakota State. And I know people don't really value tackling that highly for cornerbacks, but it's important and it's indicative of a long-term impact player. But again, this is the 7th round. This is typically what the Bengals do.
Yeah, but John,
draft.
Yeah, but then I have a question. So the Bengals, how do they know about these small school guys? Because like, do they maybe like for instance, one of their scouts has a nephew that attends that college? Because like we know the scouts aren't like doing that much research or spending time. I mean, there's like, right?
Mm-hmm. I think there was like so they drafted Mike Jordan, and then they kind of looked into like the database online. They saw another Jordan, and he plays cornerback. And like, oh, okay, this will probably work. But yeah, they don't draft a lot of small school guys that often, but this is typically where they find them, and maybe practice squads in the cards for Jordan Brown. But that cornerback room is deep right now because they signed B.W. Webb to a 3-year contract. They brought back Denard. It's going to be interesting to see how they distribute playing time there. And they still have, again, Phillips and Harris on the roster still. Kavari Russell still there. Tony McRae got ERFA tender. So now you add Brown to that group, and it kind of just solidifies its strength a little bit and adds a guy that has ball skills. And if he's going to translate well into the NFL, it's going to be because of that.
Yeah.
And also, we forgot a pick, by the way.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, Deshaun Davis, the linebacker of Auburn.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, Deshaun Davis from Auburn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This guy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Ryan Finley, Jermaine Pratt were teammates at NC State. Drew Sample and John Ross were teammates at Washington. Rodney Anderson, Joe Mixon were teammates at Oklahoma. Deshaun Davis and Carl Lawson were teammates at Auburn. So this is like the 4th or 5th reunion that the Bengals made in this draft. And Davis is probably the best candidate to push Hardy Nickerson off of the roster. He's only 5'11", 234. So very similar size to Devin Bush, the linebacker that went to Pittsburgh, but not even in the same realm of athleticism. He's just not an athletic guy, and more or less the same kind of athlete of a Preston Brown, just that downhill thumper that can get into the backfield. He has decent explosion to his name, but lateral quickness, lateral agility, any potential in coverage is not there. You're looking at just a 2-down run defender, but the production is there. And people rave about his character, his leadership, and that was another theme, I guess, in this draft. So this is a guy
I can speak to his character. I saw the video when he was drafted. That was very touching. Like I cried. You know, when he was like with his family, and then like he hugged them and the stuff.
Right.
There was very few highlights of him. There was more of that.
But I like that aspect. I like that he was productive, and I think he's probably has a better chance of being better than Hardy Nickerson. But you look at the linebacker group now. On the outside, you have a lot of athletes. You have Nick Vigil, Jermaine Pratt, Jordan Evans, and Malik Jefferson, all great athletes. And then at middle linebacker, you still have a middling athlete in Preston Brown. You just gave $16 million to, and then you have Deshaun Davis probably backing him up. So I wanted to see another athlete here. I do like the production. I do like the pedigree of Davis as a pick, but there were more athletic linebackers available on day 3, and I think they waited a little bit too long to kind of fill out this position group. That position is still a weakness unless Preston Brown proves something that we haven't seen before. And hopefully they just find a way to get the best athletes on the field at all times.
Yeah, well, you look at Deshaun Davis, John, and yeah, maybe we say he's not that athletic, but man, that guy, what do you call it? He has muscles. I mean, that guy,
he does have muscles.
He reminds me a little bit of another Auburn linebacker drafted by the Bengals.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't put some respect on his name.
Okay. But they had muscles, both of them, a lot of them.
The other dude had a lot of muscles in his neck. That's what I remember.
Yeah, that's what he's famous for. But he had muscles, other places. Okay, look. Let's get to the undrafted free agents. And John, you are very excited about Stanley Morgan. Yes, take it away.
This dude should have been drafted probably early on day 3, because when you look at the production, mind you, he had 1,004 receiving yards at Nebraska, and you think that's not that big of a deal. That offense had less than 3,000 passing yards. So you accounted for more than 33% of Nebraska's passing game, which in itself is amazing because Nebraska isn't known for passing the ball. He was the first receiver in the history of Nebraska. Now, mind you, this is one of the most storied college programs in college football. He was the first receiver to eclipse 1,000 receiving yards. So 1,000 receiving yards in Nebraska is like 2,000 receiving yards at Florida. It's unheard of. It's very rare. So the production was there for Morgan. The athleticism is there. He's an all-around great athlete in terms of speed, explosion, flexibility. 70th, at least 70th percentile in all those areas at 6 foot 200 pounds. A very solid route runner, very good at the catch point. This is a guy with the upside to become a long-term starter, or maybe even better than that. And I think if you put him in a fair competition with this receiving group, He can beat out Cody Core. He can beat out Josh Malone. He maybe even giving John Ross a run for his money. This guy was a very much a draftable player that the Bengals somehow managed to swoop up as an undrafted free agent. I know that the Vikings were also trying to get him, and I think he chose the Bengals offer because, without drafting a receiver, this receiver room in itself is ripe for competition. And I think that's a factor that Morgan considered when talking about this, because again, behind AJ Green, behind Tyler Boyd, there's a lot of depth with potential, but that potential has not that potential is still potential.
Okay.
Hasn't come into production. Yeah,
that's true. But John, for me, okay, the success of a receiver is his ability to get separation. Okay, now maybe the catches aren't there, maybe the numbers aren't there like John Ross, but I attribute a big part of that to a scheme and the quarterback's ability to throw people open. Okay,
right.
So what I'm saying is, I would put John. People, they're so low on John Ross. He was getting separation like nobody's business. Okay, so I view any of these guys that they bring in as fourth receivers, backups. I think John Ross is clearly the number 3. I don't think it's not like he's going to have it handed to him. But no. I just don't see anybody we get in the undrafted free agency or elsewhere being able to compete with that kind of elite separation.
And that's fine, but you're talking about an offense that you want to mirror the Rams, and they ran 11 personnel over 90% of the time, which has 3 receivers on the field. So you're gonna have every once in a while receivers rotating in and out. And this is a guy that you can be comfortable activating. You can be comfortable playing on special teams. He's going to have that value to him as well. This guy should be playing over both Cody Core and Josh Malone, and with enough time, he may become a long-term option for this team, because they do have Tyler Boyd entering into a contract year. I do think they're going to get AJ Green under contract, but there's that aspect. There's the aspect of John Ross still yet to prove himself. So I do think that Morgan has long-term value here, and for an undrafted.
Oh yeah, no, he has value. He has value.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I think it's like the 3 receivers, and then the other, like you said. I mean, the Josh Malone, he had that 1 touchdown, so that probably gets him right there. Remember, he had a long touchdown. Yeah. That right there gets him like a head, kind of like a running a start. But no, yeah, I see what you're saying. We definitely need to think of 4 receivers. But I'm just saying, I think John Ross is just based on what I saw, like in the vacuum, not his production, not the actual catches, because there's a lot of confusion, miscommunication, right? Being underthrown, all that kind of a stuff. And hopefully, 3 quarterback coaches can help Dalton get in sync with him. Okay, talking about quarterbacks, we have Jacob Dolegala. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's good enough.
Okay, yeah, and he's from Central Connecticut. Like, how in the world did they find this guy?
It's hard to miss him. He's 6'7".
Were they just messing around on YouTube like we do after they draft a guy? Is that what they do? I know they're not going to Central Connecticut. That's at least like $50.
Nobody goes to bus fare. I don't even think it's real cool.
No, I mean, that's at least $50 of bus fare, right?
Yeah. To Connecticut?
I've never taken a bus.
That's an expensive Greyhound.
Yeah. And then, if you think about I don't think Mike Brown would have his scouts sleeping on the streets. So maybe like an Airbnb or something.
Oh, he would at least give him a cardboard box. The very minimum.
Yeah. So, okay. But look, this Jacob guy, he was one of only 2 quarterbacks that they brought in. They wanted him. They knew they wanted him. And Ryan Finley. And they got both of them. Like, how often are you like, there's 2 quarterbacks who I identify in this draft as the best quarterbacks, and you get both of them so late in the draft? That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little optimistic, because teams kind of say that every year. But yeah, so when in the future, when they're looking at quarterbacks, they're not very. They're extremely transparent, I guess, in terms of what they like and what they don't. So that's something to keep an eye out for the future. But yeah, Jake had a chance to be drafted, I think, late on day 3. He had that late momentum surge as a 6th or 7th round pick. Unfortunately, it's only 254 players picked. So he ended up having a choice between, I think, the Colts and the Bengals. And I think the Colts ended up signing Chad Kelly, who was drafted a couple years ago and has some issues of his own. So he decided to go with the Bengals, because right now, besides Finley, you have Jeff Driscoll and Brad Kaya filling at the quarterback room. So I think there's a chance that he can make a name for himself on the practice squad. And I like his ability. 6'7", 240, but he moves well. He moves well, and
he moves really well. He throws really well on the run. Like, again, you know what I was saying about Travion? What I was like, this guy seems taller. This guy seems shorter. I was like, oh, another smaller quarterback, another 6'2" quarterback. He's 6'6", and
Yeah.
he moves like a 6'2" quarterback, and he throws on the run like a 6'2" quarterback. You know what I mean? Lot of potential in that regard. I didn't see much of what else he does because the highlights are so limited.
Yeah.
But
The
but
playbooks
I
are very
was
extensive at Central Connecticut State, so there's a
yeah.
lot of projection.
Yeah, so we got a lot of other guys to cover. I'll just mention them, and John, Keaton Sutherland. Now that's not related to the famous.
I thought it was Jack Bauer. Honestly, I really did.
Yeah,
I was disappointed when it wasn't.
it seems like his parents were playing like a joke, like a prank or something, but they just trying to fool all of us. But okay, A&M. He played with Jim Turner, so obviously he gets the humor, he gets the culture, of the greatest human being. I forgot what Zach Taylor described him as, but Jim Turner, right?
Yeah.
Great human being. Okay, so he gets all that, and Jim Turner likes him, and we know Jim Turner's evaluation is very precise and nuanced. Like when he decided, I want Bobby Hart because, I talked to his college coach. So, what do you think of this guy, John?
Yeah, there's the Turner connection. There's also the Williams connection. So if he ever finds time on the field, there's going to be that chemistry there. But I don't have athletic testing in front of me to go off of. But just in the minimal tape that I've seen, he's an explosive athlete, and that kind of goes in line with both Jonah Williams and Mike Jordan. And I think it's telling of what this offensive line is going to be expected to do, and it's a lot of zone blocking. It's to get out of your stance quickly and get your hands on the other guy's pads and the other guy's assignment. And he was a dominant run blocker at Texas A&M. That's the reason why Williams was so productive there. He ran behind him a lot at left guard. And again, that's two left guards now the Bengals have brought in, and Clint Bowling's on an expiring contract, so it doesn't really look good for him long term. But I think similar to like a Rod Taylor, this is a guy that you can maybe rely on for some long-term depth, and the connection to Turner is going to help him potentially either probably make the practice squad with an outside chance of making the team. But yeah, it's rare to find solid starters on Power 5 schools as undrafted free agents, so this is a good signing by them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just cruise through the rest of them. Okay, so we all know we needed another linebacker, and we didn't get another one. We got two in the draft, and then we got another one, Sterling Sheffield from Maine.
More of an edge rusher than a linebacker.
Okay.
I think they list him as a linebacker, but yeah, I did not like how they didn't address edge rusher. If anyone knows me, they know that was one of my biggest needs going in for the Bengals, and if this is the only guy they brought in, you can basically expect that the 5 edge rushers on the roster right now are going to make the team, and that's relying on Jordan Willis and Kerry Wynn for significant snaps potentially, and that's not the best strategy for that. But I don't really have a lot of thoughts on Sheffield. Went to Maine.
Wait, John, there. When you say edge rusher's biggest need, can you just explain for me as a fan, where do you see Lawson? Like, do you think he's going to be fully back and getting more snaps?
Because if he's not, your second best edge rusher is Sam Hubbard, and while he had 6 sacks last year, you can't really expect him to be more productive than that unless he takes a huge jump in development from something we haven't seen from college and from last year. So yeah, like Dunlap is 30 going on 31 years old. Again, Hubbard is a decent run defender with minimal pass rush upside. So you're counting on Lawson to be, continuing to build, and coming off that torn ACL, we just kind of have to temper expectations a little bit. And even still, like a dominant pass rusher for Lawson is still kind of shouldn't really be the expectation. It should always be considered that complementary piece. So edge rusher, I think, is still a glaring need for them. And unfortunately, they didn't really address it in the draft. And it's stupid to assume Sheffield will be anything more than just a practice squad player, but they're going to need some major jumps in development from both Jordan Willis and Sam Hubbard if they want to turn that position into a strength.
Well, Hubbard had some big plays last year, but okay. Yeah. Okay. So then Charles Holland from Tiffin, is that the university, John?
It sounds both of those names sounded fake. Charles Holland sounded like an English knight. I don't recognize that.
So is it like a tax write-off thing? Like you say, I took this undrafted free agent and he doesn't exist. Is this like a scheme?
That would make sense. That would make sense.
Yeah. But whatever you do you got to financially You got to know how to run a franchise, and obviously the Bengals do. Okay, so John, that is all we're going to say today. We're not going to give our grades. We're going to save those for when Hoji is back, and hopefully that will be in the next day or two. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to our patrons again. Thank you for being patronizing toward us. It's Ashante Sanders and Tim Rashir, Andrew Seiler, Brian Taylor, Michael Ford, and Tanner Guerin. So thank you all for patronizing us. And that is all. We will see you next time. Sweetie, bye.